values. I inlaid it with gold, silver and copper, so all precious metals. And that was, like I said, around value, so how different people look at things. So, whether we look at the shield as a piece of artwork, contemporary Indigenous artwork, whether we only look at the precious metals that are inlaid in it, or whether we valued it for the shape, the form, the traditions that go with it. So,
meet David Doyle, a Barkandji and Malyangapa man who is a health worker, artist, writer and entrepreneur. He is today's guest on A Home in the Outback, an independent podcast about people living, working and creating in the far west of New South Wales. I'm your host, Catherine Waite. David was born in Broken Hill, but his family is from the Menindee region of the Baaka or Darling River. For the last 20 years he's worked as an Aboriginal health worker, particularly in chronic disease, and he is currently employed by the Royal Flying Doctors Service. He started woodworking to help with depression and is an emerging artist. In 2023, he won the Maari Ma Art Prize for his piece, Values. He is also a knowledge holder of Barkindji bush medicines and edible plants. He's currently working on a plant catalogue of Kinchega National Park and hopes one day there'll be a database on plants showing their nutritional and medicinal breakdown.
Thanks, Catherine. I was actually born here in Broken Hill at the Broken Hill Base Hospital, which is our regional hub for all the communities around this area. So basically most people are born at the hospital. But I went home to Menindee, which I called home for up until about 10 or 12 years ago. I say 12, my wife tells me it's only 10, so it feels a lot longer. And we moved into Broken Hill for work, but when I was out at Menindee, growing up out there was fantastic. It was like those stories of growing up in a village that looks after the whole of you. If you did the wrong thing, someone would kick you in the bum and tell you that was not the right thing to be doing. So that the whole community helped bring me up, and I still have really good close friends and connections back out there. So I try and get back out at least once a week or more, but just due to travel, I haven't been able to for a little while now.
Tell me about your family's history and the story of your family. Yeah,
sure. I might work backwards. So start with me. I've got a wife and 2 kids. So my kids are, one of them's 18, the other one's 14. So we moved into Broken Hill because of work. For me, like I said, 10 to 12 years ago, my parents both worked pretty hard in the horticulture industry. Mum doing casual work, Dad was always a full-time employee. So Dad's got one of the best work ethics that I know of anyone. He's still one of those old guys that likes to set his alarm clock 15 minutes early to make sure that he's never late, and then he still gets to work early anyway. So he and Mum are separated now, but Dad's in here in Broken Hill working in the mine. So he's, like I said, his work ethic's that good that the mine that's closing down and still keeping on until the end of the year to keep the place running, and just because he just one of the people that really loves whatever he does. Mum's out at Menindee, still living with one of my sisters lives out there. I've got a sister that lives here in Broken Hill and a brother that lives in Nowra. Dad is originally from Maryborough, Victoria. So he moved from there when he was 16, and my granddad was the last baker out at Menindee. So they had a bakery. My granddad and grandma ran that until they moved back to Victoria, and then Dad just stayed here because he'd already started a relationship with Mum. Mum's family are from Menindee, Pooncarie region, and her dad, that's Mum's mum is from that region. Mum's dad was from Wilcannia, and his family from his father's family from the Cunnamulla region, but they were traditionally from a little bit south of there, so the Malyangapa country, which is north of Broken Hill, so sort of halfway between us and the Queensland border. So we've got ties to both Barkandji through my grandmother and Malyangapa through my granddad, who was Barkandji as well. So the story starts to get into a family tree, turns into a forest soon after that. So we've got quite an extensive maternal family here through mum's side. She's got, I want to say, 4 sisters and one that had passed away when she was quite young. 2 brothers who are all still with us. My grandmother, who's turning 83 this year, is still living out at Menindee, still independent and living on the river, and who I still get to spend a bit of time with, and not as much as I'd like to, but mum's mother is the side of the family that I'd spent most of my childhood growing with the cousins, the uncles and aunties. And my grandparents looked after us a lot because mum and dad were working, so I got to spend a lot of time with them, which was great because we did a lot of camping, a lot of fishing and hunting. So I learnt a lot of the foundational stuff around our culture when I was really young, but I didn't realise that I'd learnt it until I started to gain an interest again later in life, to the point where my wife she corrects me every now and then that I'm not using an English word, I'm using a Barkindji word that other people don't know. But because I grew up in a community where everybody kind of knew those common words or phrases, we all use them. So I just thought they were a natural part of the English language. But yeah, they're not. So I learnt that one. So when people look at me strangely, I have to ask them if they know that word or not. So my grandma's mother was part of the stolen generation. She was taken away from Menindee when she was 14 and came home when she was 20, I think it was. So she was taken to to Cootamundra Girls' Home, which was called a finishing school, but basically they were taught to be servants in houses. So my grandma did that for a few years. She ran away a few times, and then the last time they said, well, you can go home, but you find your own way home. So she worked basically from Sydney back to Menindee. By the time she got home, the rest of her family had been collected by the welfare board and sent off. So one of her sisters got sent to Melville Island. The other one's brothers and sisters got sent to closer areas, which were still quite a way away, like Lake Argellico, those kinds of places. And I didn't really, because they ended up living in those places, so I didn't have a huge amount to do that. The one that went to Melville Island, she came home to Menindee to live, so I got to spend a lot of time with Auntie Isabel and my great-grandma, and they both had different experiences of being taken away. Auntie Isabel had a good experience. She was in a convent type thing, and so she, one of her the things that made her proud was while she was up there, they taught her how to sew, and she actually made the cloak for the Pope when he came out and visited. In around the 50s, 60s, something like that. So that was a pretty big deal. And my great grandmother, Nana King, her experience was different. So she was basically taught to be a slave to anybody else. And while she said the people were generally pretty good to her, she just missed home so much. So, and by that time, her parents had passed away as well. So didn't really have much to do with it. My Auntie Isabel told lots of stories. My great-grandma didn't, who was older, didn't tell us as many stories because she still had the fear of the welfare coming to take her kids, and they actually did take my grandmother as well. But Nana King actually got in a car and chased the welfare down and said, I'm actually at work and I want my daughter back, and brought her home the same day. So there was still that fear the whole time that at any point if you would have your kids taken off you, and she would, well, that's what made her reluctant to share her information. So I noticed further down that you've got written down about our totem, so we actually don't know. We think that Nana King probably did know. Being 14, she would have had a good idea. Her mother, though, was Irish, I believe, so non-Indigenous, and we take our totems from our mother's side, but with colonisation they learnt kind of like an adoption type thing where the ladies would be partnered up with someone in the camp or community that was from the right side of the marital moiety system. So moiety is kind of like the word for totem, but means a little bit different. So there's two main moieties. One of them's eagle, wedge-tailed eagle. The other one's crow, and they're the word for them in Barkindji is biliera for the eagle, wedge-tailed eagle. Depending on which region you're from, if we're at southern Barkindji, we use the word waraku, and then the crow is waku. And it doesn't matter which region you're from. Waku is the same from the northern Barkindji right through to the southern. So from tracing it back, we worked out that my great-grandmother's mother would have been partnered with someone from the waku side, or when we start talking about moieties, it's another word again, so kilpera. So she would have been of the kilpera side. So that's basically as far back as we can go. Is we know we're on the crow side of the moiety system.
Is the moiety system got to do with who you can marry, kind of thing?
Yeah. So underneath, everything's listed basically underneath the eagle and the crow, all plants and animals, and you have to marry someone from the opposite side. But also there's different parts that you still can't marry into on the opposite side, and that was just to make sure that there was no interbreeding, and making sure that everything was done the correct way, I suppose, to make sure that we weren't breaking any of our laws and rules. So it gets a lot more complicated than that, and that sounded complicated enough. So people are still working on that. Some people are working on, they've been calling it reigniting some of the totems or moieties, or we actually call them out here in this country wanga, which means meat in New South Wales, apparently, because we can't eat that meat, which is handy that I'm a crow, because I don't think I'd like to eat a crow. But we looked after those animals. We weren't overtaxing our resources, and that even if we're in the same region with other Barkindji people, we weren't going to be competing for food. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Does it still exist, or is it? It
does to an extent. So we've got people that a lot of people still do know their totems, and or the side of the moiety system they're on, like myself. The people that do know their totems do avoid eating that food, but one of my friends, Anthony Haywood, even though he's an Yimpa, his totem is teal duck, so he just doesn't eat any duck, which is handy because I love duck. So we don't, that's how easy it works. He can't eat it, I can eat it, so we. He's not going to be using that resource, and I will be, so we're not going to be overextending.
What was like life growing up in Menindee? And you mentioned earlier that your parents were in the horticulture industry, so I imagine they were picking fruit or working in the... Yep. And that's all changed now, isn't it? So
look, it has. So big industry for Menindee was the grapes, and a lot of people in Australia would know the Menindee seedless. It comes from Menindee. It was developed out of Menindee. Unfortunately, Menindee doesn't even produce that anymore. We don't produce any grapes for the market. People still do grow them for their own use or for small amounts, for small markets and stuff, or to give to their friends. But basically, there's no industry for the fruit and horticultural sector in Menindee anymore, which is unfortunate because the population went from about 900 when I was growing up, and I think it's 550 now, which you can say is almost like half, and that was due to people having to move away for work. Not only the grapes, but it was a big citrus growing area. There was the cotton farm more south of us that employed quite a lot of people, so there's really low employment opportunities out at Menindee at the moment. And it's kind of one of the reasons we looked into and started the Wantanella Tours, because we wanted to show people that there is an industry, but you kind of have to chase it yourself. So instead of trying to support people doing it, I said, my wife and I talked about it and thought, well, we'll actually do it. We'll be able to put some data together and say to the community, we can actually be our own business entity. We don't need to rely on other people. There's a lot of opportunities out here. I've got licenses in just about everything, but one of them is collecting native foods, because I was going to the school doing some education, and I was teaching people how to use quandongs in. So quandongs are one of the fruits that grow out here. Cosmetics from it. So we were doing it for a Mother's Day, leading into Mother's Day. So the kids were making. I make cream and soap and some lip balms, and so I was just showing the kids how we do that and the ingredients that go into it. But I looked online. I had to, because you have to buy the products. You can't just go out and pick them, even though they grow everywhere for when you're working with the school. So I bought quandongs for them, and a kilo of quandongs cost $400, and I thought, this is ridiculous. So I applied for and got a license, so that now, because I've got this license, I can actually pick it and the kids can eat them, or the kids can use them in their cosmetics. So I don't pick anything commercially, but there is the opportunity, if we wanted to pick commercially. We've looked into it. It's a lot of work, especially considering that my wife and I both work for Flying Doctors pretty much full time.
Mentioned you've had about 20 years working in kind of the health field. What's your observations and reflections in Aboriginal health? Has it improved at all over that time in our local areas, or are you kind of seeing the same things continue? Yeah,
look, it's a really good question. So chronic disease, I was talking about before, it's a part that I've spent most of my career working in. Since 2005, I started in chronic disease. I just remember that because we did a community screening day, and pretty much about 75% of the communities in the region got, the populations of the communities got screened, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So it was really good to find out a lot of information, but it was also a really good foundation for making sure that we were checking for the right things, because a lot of our health conditions can be silent, kidney disease, liver disease. So these are a lot of things that we don't actually feel. You don't feel sick from until they're almost ready to give up on you. So I have seen the communities accessing the clinics more. So when we first started, it was really hard to get people to start coming in. Especially to see doctors and have regular schedule appointments, and people have that side of it's become a lot better, to people coming to it, and also doing that preventative screening. So some of when we first started were reluctant, even though I said there was 75% of the community, because we'd go out and get our families and friends to all come to it. There was still a little bit of reluctance afterwards, because after we did all that screening, there was a lot of things that got picked up. So people thought, oh, well, I've ended up with diabetes because of that check, but you actually had diabetes beforehand. It's just that we checked for it. So now we are good at finding the issues. We're getting people in the community, I keep saying we, but I actually mean people in the community, because I'm one of the people as well, are getting better at taking our medications, seeing the doctors reasonably regular. There are still a few people out there that are reluctant to, because they've had a bad experience, and I can completely understand that as well. But we are progressing, so we're doing better around the maintenance and the surveillance of people's health concerns, getting much better at picking things up, and we know that because we're actually starting to see that unfortunately younger people are starting to develop these diseases, but I don't know if they're actually developing them or we're just picking them up earlier because we're doing that screening.
So how long have you been with the RFDS working in kind of health?
Just over 5 years now. So it went over, just over 5 years ago. As So I am the only Aboriginal health practitioner there at the moment. They did have a lady working there as well. She also grew up in Menindee, but spent a lot of time in South Australia. But she worked for a little while. She was pregnant when she came on, had a baby, had the maternity leave, come back, and she was pregnant again. So, yeah.
So what communities do you go to with your role?
Look, we've got 17 or 18 communities that the RFDS visit here, including a couple of stations. I go to Pooncarie, Menindee, Ivanhoe, White Cliffs, Tibooburra, Louth, Tilpa, and one of the stations called Wyawera. Is that 8? Just trying to make sure I haven't missed any. So yeah, they're the ones that I go to. Probably only a couple of times a year. The regular ones are Pooncarie, Ivanhoe, White Cliffs, Louth. So they're the ones I get to at least monthly.
And as well as health, you're also an artist. But how did you get interested in art?
It's a bit of a longer story as well. I feel like all my stories are long. So I fell into art around the same time that I was finishing up with Maari Ma. When I left Menindee, I had some serious depression on board. And I quit my job, so a couple of weeks later I got asked to come and work for the Aboriginal Health Service in here, so I thought I'd give that a go. And I started feeling getting a bit more depressed again about 5 years ago. The first time I wasn't doing anything productive. I was actually drinking a lot, so it wasn't really good for me at all. And the next time, although I still have a beer, I went out the back because I had a few tools and decided to carve a piece of wood to see what it turned out like, and it kind of all started from there. So the artwork is a bit of a therapy for me.
Can I just interrupt you? What was the depression related to?
Oh, look, it's lots of burnout from work. I was pretty much, the team health is still, especially the clinical side of it, woman heavy. So when I was out at Menindee, I was pretty much the only male working there. And even at the RFDS, so in our team, there's only 4 of us. I work with 3 women, one of them being my wife. And out at Menindee, one of them was my wife as well, the same one. So, and I was also the youngest health worker. So some of our other health workers were quite a bit older. So I'd spend a lot of time in the ambulance, going out helping with accidents and stuff like that. But I was seeing a lot of people dying early or committing suicide or getting really sick. And I think it's because I'd grown up close with a lot of these people. It was that was really hard. Plus, living in the community, you kind of never not at work. People would come around and say I'm not well.
Sorry, and you were talking about how you got into woodwork, and you were kind of, and I asked you about depression. So
so and I still use it as a bit of a therapy. I do actually all different types of art now. So I had actually, although my mum, my grandma, my great grandmother, the one part of the stolen generation, were all artists. My great grandmother she started carving emu eggs, and I'll show you one in a moment. When she was about 70, and then she gave it up by the time she was 80 or 85 because it was hurting her hands too much. My grandma, mum's mother, painted and carved wood, and my mum was a bit of a wood carver as well. So I've kept doing that, but I've also looked at lots of other things. So I've worked in recycled metals, still making with a cultural foundation. So most of the things I make have either got some sort of cultural meaning or connection to the country that we come from. I've been doing a bit of bronze sculpture. I don't know if I just said this before, but glass as well, timber, jewellery making, And yeah, just I've for the last couple of years done a little bit of painting.
Just reflecting on your art for last year, it was to me as an outsider, it looked like a big year for you. Or you were awarded the Maari Ma Art Award.
Yep.
You started Wantanella. You're travelling regularly, and you're increasingly being called upon to do interviews and to talk. So I mean, tell me about the art award that you won and what were you trying to say through that artwork?
Yes, that was I was actually making a shield for a friend, and when I finished making the shield, I thought, this is a really pretty piece of timber. It was beefwood. Beefwood's from my granddad's country, not traditionally from Barkindji country, but from Malyangapa country. And what I wanted to say with that piece was, I reflected on the year before. I made a piece which was a boomerang, and when I finished it, it had a crack in it. I was about to throw that in the fire. I thought, I won't throw it in the fire. I'll keep it. It was a natural crack, just from where the bend in the timber was, and I ended up filling it with gold leaf and epoxy, and it was around what we see as wealth that the boomerang was. And that if someone wanted to remove the gold out of the boomerang, they'd actually have to destroy the boomerang. So it was about what we perceived as wealth, whether it was a wealth of knowledge from Barkandji's been in the region for at least 45,000 years. And after the boomerang, someone actually said to me, it's pretty expensive for gold leaf, and I thought, well, that's a bit of a cheeky comment. So this year I did something along the same theme, which was the shield, but this one was called Values, and I inlaid it with gold, silver and copper, so all precious metals, and that was, like I said, around values. So whether how different people look at things, so whether we look at the shield as a piece of artwork, contemporary Indigenous artwork, whether we only look at the precious metals that are inlaid in it, or whether we valued it for the shape, the form, the traditions that go with it. So I was fortunate enough to win the Maari Ma Art Award, and I wasn't convinced I would. When you walk into those, when I enter something, I'm pretty confident. When you walk in and see everybody else's artwork, it's, oh my gosh, it's so difficult. So that was my first local first place. The boomerang got me People's Choice Award from the Pro Hard Art competition last year. I have won other art awards, but not in Broken Hill. So it's it has picked up momentum. Last year particularly, I travelled a lot. I wear quite a few different caps. I sit on the Elders Committee for Kinchega as a proxy member for my mum. I'm not old enough to be an elder just yet.
Isn't that a good feeling?
It is. I feel older. My body feels old enough to be an elder. I work for the Flying Doctors. I do a little bit of consultancy stuff, just when people, nothing official, anything big, but people have got questions that generally, quite a few of them come to me, or I'm becoming referred, the person that's referred a lot. I also have been working with the Australian Museum on a project out at Kinchega to try and predate the occupation of Barkandji out around the region. So there's a little, I did say before that Barkandji been in the region for 45,000 years. There's a little bit of discrepancy, and I think you get that with regardless of which sciences you're in, but that date was, they concluded that date in the 50s, and of course things have changed now. So they think that the date was incorrect. So we've actually done some studies, and we've found one fireplace that's 32,000 years old, so that's been confirmed. So now we kind of know the region to be looking in. I've done this year a couple of last year, arts residencies, one at the end of the last year over at Portland, which is near Bathurst, around at a bronze foundry, which was really good, with an artist called Harry Fasher, who was an amazing mentor. And I'm also building a plant catalogue of the plants we've currently got on Kinchega at the moment. So particularly the medicinal type ones, or the food type ones, because they're the ones I'm got the most interest in. Plants have been a bit of a passion of mine for a while, so I've also been working with a lady out of Sydney on a plant identification book aimed at school kids, so it's written pretty easy to read English, a lot of the scientific stuff taken out, and included in that, of course, we've got the English name, the Latin names, and if and when available, a Barkindji name for it. And then also in there we put in traditional uses of the plants, and we're talking about, because I use them a lot more contemporarily now, how we can incorporate those into our current lifestyles. So that's been a really good project. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, and we're only looking at about 12 to 15 plants for that, so we're not overwhelming the kids with this great big book. It'll be something that they'll be able to build on the whole time. Through that process, though, that same lady, she's a landscape architect with a background in psychology. She's actually been coming out and doing workshops out here around the plants, the medicinal uses, which I help her present, and she's doing a PhD. And as part of that now, she just rang me the other day and asked if I'd like to go to Uruguay with her to present in September. So present the project to a psychology conference, which is pretty exciting. The last time I went overseas was when my wife and I got married, and that's the only time I've been overseas.
The work that you're doing with the Kinchega and the plants, and you've mentioned this connection with Sydney. So, what's that about? Are you trying to discover new plants, or not discover new plants, but understand?
Yeah, look, there's probably a fair bit of potential to discover plants out at our way. It's definitely not the reason that I'm doing it. What I'm looking at is, I had a friend who worked in the RFDS. He works for Mission Australia now. But he sent me a photo once of a plant. He knew that I was into bush medicine. We traditionally, growing up, we used a couple of different plants, one of them being the Aeromophila longifolia, or the emu bush. And that was pretty much, we used that for everything. So kind of what happened was I looked at the plant and I thought, I actually don't know that one, but I've seen it around. So I started to do a search of the plants and realised it was it's listed as one of the most potent bush medicines in Australia, the gumby or the Pittosporum angostifolium. Native apricot is another word for it. But, it has a lot of medicinal properties. It's an antifungal, antiviral, and an antibacterial. It's also a sleep enhancer, so it doesn't put you to sleep, it just helps you get into that nice, relaxing sleep. So, that kind of thought, I thought, this would have been used a lot, but we don't know about it anymore. And I think I actually forgot to say a part about my grandmother. We still spend a lot of time, and my great-grandmother used to go on country quite a bit, and we'd be talking and learning about things, and my grandma was teaching me about the medicine plants, and she knew about 3 or 4 of them. So now when we go out, when we get the opportunity, we're both able to share information. I say, "Oh, Nan, do you know this one?" And she'll say yes or no, and we'll have a talk about it. If she doesn't know, or if she finds something, she'll say, "Do you know this one?" We know that the country's doing well when the plants are doing well. So through the drought, I was having a really hard time finding the emu bush, the Aeromophila longifolia, and following the drought, it's starting to come up everywhere, because there's, no, I'll be caught out on this. There's something like 70 different varieties of Aeromophila in the region. So finding the right one and they all have medicinal purposes. Some of them are used for men's business, some are used for women's business. So we're kind of a little bit picky about, and we know that the longifolia is safe for us all to use. So we use that quite a lot. But through that, I've also looked into other medicinal plants from around Australia, and I think we've actually got that here on country. We would use that. So I'm going to use the word reigniting again, but that the knowledge base behind it, and then being able to follow it up with some information from the place that I might have found it. On top of that, I've also made connections with a nutritionist, dietitian out of, I can't remember if it's University of Sydney or University of New South Wales, who is keen to do a nutritional breakdown on bush foods. I've also got some connections into someone doing a medicinal breakdown of medicine plants. So being able to have that knowledge, because I guess, at the moment we're used to learning from all different areas. So I just want to make sure that we've got all the foundations covered. So I'm learning off of my elders, which I can relate back to our people, but also, if I say to someone, Auntie said to use this on your skin condition, we've got that evidence. But also then if I've had it broken down, they can go to the doctor and I've been using this, and they ask them what it's for, we can actually give them the link to it. I try and post the links to all the scientific findings for all these medicines. The only thing is there's no real central database, so I guess that in the long term that's what I'm looking at making for us, is having a centralised database for all the nutritional information, medicinal information, the plant catalogue, all to come together, which will basically be based out of the Kinchega Elders group. So they'll be the owners of the information.
I also wanted to ask you about the Voice referendum last year,
Yep.
and I looked at the results that the Guardian Australia website did, and the results for, say, the Menindee community was just over 35%, and in Broken Hill it was between 24 and 27. So, what were your thoughts on the Voice and the outcome?
Yeah, look, I think I was really disappointed in the Menindee results, considering the population's about 50-50. So, there was a lot of Indigenous people that obviously thought no, and I think it was more around the education, around what the Voice was actually about. So it was a lot of misinformation about giving up rights to land or access, or some of the rights that we'd already gotten. So there were all these misconceptions. We went into it knowing that, when I say we, my wife and I, we were going into it with the idea that we probably wasn't going to go through. So wasn't as devastated as a lot of my other community members were. We were kind of... I said to Carol, my wife, if it doesn't pass, we're in no worse a position. It just means that we need to continue to work towards getting back to there. But we kind of knew that Australia would say no to it, I suppose. It's the long run, the short answer for that. And there's been a lot of people that have come up. Still, you go in the cities, you still see people wearing the Yes shirts. One of my friends has still got his Yes poster up on the fence. Also, I think it brought out a lot of the worst in Australia as well. There was a lot of, and particularly social media, and it sort of almost looks like it's opened up a dialogue for people to be able to put up comments that are not friendly towards Indigenous people.
I'm just intrigued for you. You're sitting across me, you're still smiling, you're still working hard. I guess.
Yeah. Look,
where's the hope for you? And, do you have feelings of giving up?
No, look, I think that's what's keeping me going, actually, is, there's not a huge... There's a lot of people in the areas that are doing small amounts. I'm not the only one that's looking at plants. I'm not the only one that's making Aboriginal art. I'm not the only one that's trying to keep the cultural practices alive. So it's just that I'm doing a lot of those things, not just one aspect of it, I suppose. So trying to learn as much as I can, because I think that, again, through education and through teaching our kids is how we're going to make a difference. This is why when I started with the Flying Doctors, I actually said to them, I want to work with kids, not people with chronic diseases. I said, because they've already got the diseases, we need to work with the kids so that they're educated when they come in to that area that people would start to normally get sick. They're already having their checkups, they're already on board, so we're actually catching things a lot earlier, and we're able to make changes for future generations. So I feel the same way about the country, around cultural connection to country, as well as connection to country, because it's not just Aboriginal people that are connected to the country. I've got a lot of non-Indigenous friends, a lot of people that have moved from other countries to Australia that feel a really strong connection to the country, and I don't believe that you have to be of the country to have that connection to the country. And it's just where you feel comfortable, where you feel at home, and if you're comfortable and feeling at home at a place, then it should be your responsibility to look after it.
That was David Doyle, a Barkindji and Malyangapa man based in Broken Hill, New South Wales. If you'd like to see any of Dave's artworks, participate in one of his Wantanella tours, or find out about his upcoming exhibitions, check out the show notes.